Welcome to the Wellbeing Podcast, where every episode is a step toward a healthier, happier you. Let's grow, thrive, and shine together.
I love that.
Today, we are diving deep into ADHD across the lifespan.
Okay.
And we've got a stack of research articles, expert opinions, even a World Health Organization fact sheet.
Wow.
Whether you're brushing up on the basics or curious about the latest research,
Right.
get ready for some myth-busting and aha moments.
It's fascinating how much our understanding of ADHD has evolved.
Right.
We used to think it was just a childhood thing.
Right.
But now we know it often continues into adulthood, with many adults going undiagnosed for years.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah.
If you struggled in school but managed to get by, maybe those early signs were missed,
Yeah.
then as an adult,
Yeah.
those same challenges can really impact your work relationships and even your mental health.
Exactly. Responsibilities increase, coping mechanisms get strained, and
Yeah.
suddenly those symptoms you maybe didn't even recognize as ADHD start causing real problems.
Okay, so let's talk about those symptoms. One of the sources had this eye-opening table about how they evolve over time.
Okay.
What really stood out to me was how hyperactivity,
Right.
that classic image of a kid bouncing off the walls,
Yeah.
actually becomes less prominent in adults.
Right, but that doesn't mean the energy just disappears.
Right.
It often morphs into this internal restlessness or difficulty with things like emotional regulation and staying motivated.
Right.
It's less about outward bursts and more about this constant mental buzz that can be hard to control.
That makes so much sense. It's not that adults with ADHD don't want to sit still or focus.
Right.
It's that their brains are literally wired differently.
Precisely. And one of the research articles from the International Association for Child and Adolescent Psychiatry and Allied Professions dives deep into the neurobiology of all of this. It talks about how ADHD involves differences in brain structure and function,
Yeah.
particularly in areas related to attention, executive functions, and reward processing.
Hold on, executive functions. That sounds pretty important. What exactly are those?
Think of them as your brain's control center.
Okay.
The mental skills you use to plan, organize, manage your time, and make decisions.
Right.
In ADHD, these functions might not be as efficient, leading to difficulties with things like starting tasks, staying on track, and resisting impulses.
So it's not just about willpower. It's
Yeah.
literally about how the brain is wired. This source even mentioned neuroimaging studies showing that certain brain regions in people with ADHD might mature slower than in those without the disorder.
Yes, and that can have a huge impact on how you learn, work, and interact with the world. One article even used this analogy.
Right.
Imagine trying to drive a car with faulty brakes. You might be able to steer and accelerate,
Right.
but stopping or slowing down becomes a real challenge.
Wow, that's a powerful image. So it's like with ADHD,
Yeah.
you might have all this potential and energy,
Right.
but without those executive functions working at full capacity,
Right.
it's harder to channel it effectively.
And that's where things like mislabeling and misdiagnoses come into play. If we don't understand the underlying brain differences, we might just see the outward behavior and label someone as lazy, unmotivated, or even defiant.
This brings up a really important point,
Yeah.
the impact of those misperceptions.
Yeah.
Not only can it delay diagnosis and treatment,
Right.
but it can also lead to feelings of shame, self-doubt, and low self-esteem. Right.
Absolutely. Imagine constantly being told you're not trying hard enough,
Right.
when in reality you're putting in more effort than anyone realizes just to keep up. That can take a serious toll on your mental health.
So recognizing those symptoms and understanding the brain basis of ADHD is really the first step towards getting the right support.
Uh-huh.
But I'm curious, you mentioned earlier that there's no single test to diagnose ADHD.
Yeah.
How do clinicians actually figure out if someone has it?
It's a bit like detective work. Clinicians gather clues from your history, behaviors, and experiences to build a complete picture. They might talk to your parents, teachers, or partners, and they'll definitely ask you about your own experiences and challenges.
That's putting together a puzzle,
Yeah.
looking for patterns that fit the criteria for ADHD while also ruling out other possible explanations for those symptoms.
Exactly. And they'll also take into account your individual strengths and how those might be masking or exacerbating certain challenges.
It sounds like diagnosis is a pretty in-depth process, not just a quick checklist of symptoms.
It is, and it should be, because ADHD is complex and it affects people differently throughout their lives.
Which is a perfect segue into our next segment,
Okay.
where we'll delve into how ADHD presents differently in adults compared to children.
Stay tuned.
We'll be right back.
Sounds good. Welcome back to the deep dive. Before the break, we were talking about how diagnosing ADHD is like detective work, And once you have that diagnosis, it's like a light bulb goes off suddenly. So many things about your life start to make sense.
It's like having a key to unlock a door you've been banging on for years. You finally understand why certain things have always been such a struggle. But then the question becomes, okay, now what? What can you actually do to manage those challenges?
That's where it gets really empowering. Our sources highlight a whole spectrum of strategies that can be helpful, from lifestyle changes and behavioral therapies to medication and support groups. And it's often about combining those different methods to create a personalized plan.
It's like having a toolbox full of different tools, each serving a specific purpose. And one of the tools that often comes to mind is medication. Some of the research articles we have really delve into the different types available.
Right, and they specifically mention stimulants like methylphenidate, better known as Ritalin, as the most commonly prescribed medications for ADHD. They work by increasing the levels of certain neurotransmitters in the brain, specifically dopamine and norepinephrine.
Okay, but to be honest, I always get those two mixed up. Can you remind me what they do again?
Think of them as messengers in your brain helping signals travel efficiently. Dopamine is linked to motivation and reward, while norepinephrine plays a role in attention and alertness. In ADHD, these messengers aren't as effective, making it harder to focus, regulate emotions, and stay motivated.
So stimulants essentially boost those messengers, helping the brain function more effectively.
Exactly. And the research is pretty clear on their effectiveness. Several sources cited studies showing that stimulants can significantly reduce ADHD symptoms, leading to improvements in daily functioning academic performance, and even reducing the risk of things like accidents and substance abuse.
That's incredible. It sounds like medication can really make a huge difference for some people. But what about the potential side effects? I know one source mentioned things like insomnia, decreased appetite, and even possible growth suppression.
You're right to bring that up. Medications aren't a magic cure, and they do come with potential side effects that need to be carefully monitored by a healthcare professional. It's crucial to have open and honest conversations with your doctor about any concerns you have.
So it's really about finding that sweet spot, that balance between maximizing the benefits of medication while minimizing any negative effects. It sounds like a team effort between the individual with ADHD and their doctor.
Absolutely. And that's where the concept of shared decision making comes in. It's not just the doctor dictating what's best. The individual with ADHD, their family, and the healthcare provider should work together to determine the best course of treatment, weighing the potential benefits against any risks.
That makes a lot of sense. It's about empowering the individual to be an active participant in their own care.
Yeah.
And I noticed that while medication was a big focus in our sources, there was also a lot of emphasis on behavioral therapy, particularly for children.
Yes, and specifically behavioral parent training was mentioned as a key intervention.
Hmm.
It's all about equipping parents with strategies and techniques to manage their child's behavior, set clear expectations, and create a more structured environment.
So it's not about trying to fix the child, but rather about giving parents the tools they need to support their child's unique needs.
Exactly. It's about working with the child's strengths and challenges to create an environment where they can thrive. And one source even mentioned a really interesting point about the role of teachers in supporting children with ADHD in the classroom.
That's so important. Teachers are on the front lines, seeing these kids day in and day out. What kind of things can they do to help?
Simple things, actually, like providing clear instructions, breaking down tasks into smaller steps using visual aids, and offering frequent positive reinforcement.
It's about setting the child up for success, not just academically, but also socially. And speaking of social skills, one of the sources highlighted the importance of social skills training for individuals with ADHD.
What's fascinating here is that social skills training directly addresses the interpersonal challenges that often come with ADHD. Things like impulsivity interrupting others or difficulty reading social cues can make it hard to build and maintain relationships.
So it's about learning those unspoken rules of social interaction, like how to wait your turn, listen attentively, and respond appropriately in different situations.
Exactly. And these skills are just as important for adults with ADHD as they are for children. Think about the workplace, for example. If you're constantly interrupting colleagues, missing social cues, or struggling to stay focused in meetings, it can really impact your career.
It's like those executive function challenges we talked about earlier. They don't just affect your ability to organize your thoughts, they also impact how you interact with others.
Precisely. And that's why social skills training can be so valuable. It provides specific strategies and practice opportunities to improve those skills, building confidence and competence in navigating those social interactions. But it's not just about therapy and training. Our sources also highlight the importance of lifestyle modifications for managing ADHD.
That makes sense.
Sure.
I've heard that things like exercise and sleep can have a big impact on mental health in general. Is it the same for ADHD?
Absolutely. Things like regular exercise, healthy eating, and getting enough sleep were all mentioned as having a positive impact on overall well-being and can even help regulate some of the core symptoms of ADHD.
It's like building a solid foundation for success. If your body and mind are well-nourished and rested, you're better equipped to handle the challenges of ADHD.
Hmm.
But I have to admit, the idea of someone with ADHD meditating for mindfulness sounds a bit counterintuitive. Could you explain that one?
It might seem strange, but research suggests that mindfulness practices can actually help train the brain to become more aware of the present moment, which can be incredibly helpful in managing distractibility and impulsivity.
So it's not about clearing your mind completely, but about learning to observe your thoughts and feelings without judgment, which can help you regain control when those distractions inevitably pop up.
Exactly. It's about building that muscle of attentional control, gradually increasing your ability to focus and direct your thoughts. And that brings us back to that multifaceted approach we talked about earlier. It's not just about medication or therapy, but about weaving together different strategies to create a personalized plan that addresses your unique needs and challenges. And that might also include things like organizational tools, time management techniques, and creating a supportive work environment that minimizes distractions, right?
You got it. It's about understanding your own strengths and weaknesses, and then using those insights to structure your environment in a way that sets you up for success. But it's not just about external strategies. One source highlighted the importance of self-compassion, especially when dealing with the challenges of ADHD.
That's so crucial. It's easy to get caught up in self-criticism and negative self-talk when things don't go as planned.
It's like saying, okay, I have this condition, it presents certain challenges, but it doesn't define me as a person. And instead of beating yourself up for every misstep, you can approach those challenges with a sense of understanding and a willingness to learn and adapt. So it's about blaming the ADHD, not yourself, for those difficulties.
I love that. But I'm also wondering, at what point does someone decide they need more than just self-help strategies? When is it time to reach out to a professional?
That's a great question, and it's one that each individual has to answer for themselves. But in general, if you're feeling overwhelmed, if your symptoms are significantly impacting your work relationships or mental health, then it's definitely time to seek professional guidance.
And I imagine that professional guidance can take many forms, right? It's not just about medication or therapy, but potentially a combination of different approaches.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It might include individual therapy, support groups, medication management, or even things like coaching or occupational therapy.
It's about having a team of professionals in your corner supporting you on your journey to well-being, and that journey is unique for everyone. What works for one person might not work for another, and that's okay. Exactly. It's about finding what fits your individual needs and preferences. And remember, managing ADHD is an ongoing process, not a quick fix. There will be ups and downs, but with the right support and strategies, you can learn to navigate those challenges and thrive. And that's a perfect segue into our final segment, where we'll delve into some specific resources and tips for living well with ADHD. Stay tuned, we'll be right back.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've covered so much ground today, from understanding the brain basis of ADHD to exploring a whole toolkit of management strategies.
And now, as promised, we want to leave you with some tangible resources and tips to help you navigate this journey with more confidence.
One of the sources really emphasized that if you're struggling and suspect you might have ADHD, that first step is reaching out to a mental health professional, like a psychologist or psychiatrist.
Yeah, it's so crucial. They can do a comprehensive evaluation, taking into account your individual experiences and ruling out other potential explanations for your symptoms.
And I imagine that getting a proper diagnosis can be incredibly validating. Like, finally, there's a name for what you've been experiencing, and that opens the door to getting the right support.
Absolutely. It's like that aha moment where pieces of your life start falling into place. And once you have that diagnosis, you can start exploring the many resources out there. Several of our sources mention the value of support groups, both for individuals with ADHD and their families.
Oh, yeah? I could see how beneficial that would be. Having a community of people who truly understand the ups and downs of ADHD, who can offer advice and encouragement.
It's like having a tribe of people who get it in a way that even the most well-meaning friends or family sometimes can't. And it's not just about emotional support. These groups often share practical tips and strategies for managing everyday challenges.
That's so valuable. And what about information resources? We've touched on some research articles, but where else can people go to learn more about ADHD?
One source specifically recommended the World Federation of ADHD. They have a free guide available online in multiple languages, covering everything from the basics of ADHD to the latest research and treatment options.
That sounds like a great starting point. And for those who are more visual learners, one of the articles actually linked to a short video about ADHD in the brain. It explains the neurological basis of the condition in a really clear and engaging way.
Uh-huh. Visuals can be so helpful in understanding these complex concepts,
Yep.
but knowledge is only part of the equation. Our sources also stress the importance of putting that knowledge into action, using it to develop personalized coping strategies.
Right. We talked about behavioral therapy earlier, but what about things you can do on your own day to day?
Well, one source offered some really practical tips, particularly for parents of children with ADHD. Things like establishing clear routines, creating a structured home environment, and breaking down tasks into smaller, more manageable steps.
That makes a lot of sense. Reducing overwhelm and creating predictability can make a huge difference, not just for the child, but for the whole family.
And these principles can apply to adults as well. Think about setting up a designated workspace, using a planner to keep track of appointments, or breaking down a large project into smaller, more achievable goals.
It's all about creating an environment that works with your brain, not against it. And I love the emphasis on self-care that came up in several sources. Regular exercise, healthy eating, getting enough sleep. These aren't just good for everyone. They're especially crucial for managing ADHD.
It's like laying the groundwork for success. When you're taking care of your physical and mental well-being, you're better equipped to handle those ADHD-related challenges.
It's not about being perfect, but about making choices that support your overall well-being. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I think the biggest takeaway for me is that a diagnosis of ADHD isn't a limitation, it's a starting point.
I completely agree. It's an invitation to understand yourself better, to seek support, and to develop strategies that empower you to live a full and meaningful life.
It's about recognizing your strengths and challenges, and using that knowledge to create a life that truly reflects who you are. And remember, you're not alone on this journey. There's a wealth of resources and support available to help you every step of the way.
So keep learning, keep exploring, and keep believing in yourself. You've got this.
Thanks for listening to the Well-Being Podcast. Take care, stay inspired, and see you next time. Don't forget to subscribe and like the Well-Being Podcast. Share your thoughts and let us know in the comments what topics you'd love to hear about in future episodes.